the National Football League remains one of the most popular products in America. It certainly is in my house. With books like Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, the 90s, and But What If We're Wrong, author Chuck Klosterman is known for taking a deep dive on all things pop culture. And in his latest, Football, he's tackling America's obsession with the gridiron. You can scan the QR code on the screen to buy the book right now. And I'm happy to say Chuck Klosterman is here with me. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I'm very excited to talk to you. Football is religion in my household. So let's start with why you wrote the book. You say that football is going to be dead eventually, in your own words, and you wanted people to know why it's so popular. So elaborate.
Well, okay, so I've been, unconsciously obsessed with football for 40 years. Pretty consciously obsessed in a way of, even possibly writing a book about it for the last 20. I always wanted to do a sports book, and I knew it had to be football because of the meaning that it has to America, especially, I think, in terms of understanding the last half of the 20th century. I think if you're looking for something to sort of explain, a metaphor or an analogy for how America sort of evolved from 1950 to about 1999, football is the ideal vessel. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case moving forward in the 21st century.
So I cover business normally, and what really struck me was your argument for why football may be dead in 100 years was more economic than anything. So how is that possible when, aside from the moon landing, all of the major broadcast ratings-wise, they're all football?
I do think that football will not be the center of the culture the way it is now in 50 years or 60 years. And the assumption always, I think, from a lot of casual people, it's like, well, it must have to do with concussions or the risk or something.
That's what I thought
that is definitely part of the foundation that's going to kind of crumble. But I do think the larger issue will be economic. I think the model that we use for advertising now, particularly sort of standard conventional television advertising, which is trying to, of course, hit the broadest possible audience. It's not focused on one sort of person. Football is, because it's the last vestige of the monoculture, is supposed to kind of hit people from 8 to 80, and that's a very difficult group to advertise to as a whole. And I think as that changes, it's not going to disappear entirely, but I think the amount of money that is going to be needed for these television contracts for platforms and whatnot, might stagnate. And the NFL is in an interesting position. It cannot just exist. It can only expand. Mm-hmm. It has to get bigger. I think that there was real evidence during COVID, for example, when they had we got to play these games.
Right.
It doesn't matter if no one's in the stadium. We have to do this. We can't stop. It's not too big to fail. It is literally too big to slow down. And I do think that in the future, when this happens, there will also have been a shift culturally. Different people will be at least 2 generations removed. They will not have the same sort of obsession with football that people have now.
Generations, if I have kids, they will. I'm going to instill that in them. But I was kind of like, I don't believe him. But then when your argument was economic, I thought that was really interesting. I do want to pick up on something that you said before about how football mirrors and explains America. What are some examples you have of that?
Well, the thing that I'm sort of kind of trying to illustrate is that football begins in the 19th century and is able to evolve kind of on its own for 70 years until it sort of intersects with the rise of television and then becomes almost this ideal thing to show on television. It's good both for the medium of entertainment and it's good for the sport. Kind of changes the people's relationship with it. So in many ways, it's like the rise of football is interlocked with the rise of television and the way television changed as a product over time.
I do have a bone to pick with you, though.
Okay.
Because in your book, you say that you don't think Tom Brady is the greatest of all time and that someone else is the greatest of all time. So please explain, because you're talking to a very passionate New England Patriots fan.
Well, now I think the consensus opinion is that Tom Brady is the greatest player of all time. I think that if you asked 1,000 people, particularly people who don't follow football that closely, they would definitely say that, okay? If we look at strictly on-field performance, the physicality of the players, sort of the nature of the competition, the greatest player of all time is actually always going to be whoever is the greatest player right now.
True.
I see greatness differently. If you take someone like Jim Thorpe and you put him in the modern day, it's not just that he's going to, if you use a time machine, he couldn't compete. But he would have had a very different experience growing up. Tom Brady would have had a very different experience had he grown up, before the invention of breakfast cereal, in the late 1930s.
Or game tape, because we know that's part of his rap.
What my argument basically is this, that when we're really thinking about the term greatness, and not just in football, I'm using football as the example here, but to me, the greatest anything of all time is the first elite rendering of something that still has qualities that remain over time. So I argue that Jim Thorpe is the greatest player of all time because in some ways that is the genesis for what,
and for everyone that came after.
So when you see anybody running a football in the modern day, what you are seeing are grains of what began with a guy like Jim Thorpe, the first kind of example of greatness in this sport.
I'm just going to say, maybe Jim Thorpe, greatest all-around of all time? Brady, 7 championships, greatest in the Super Bowl era.
Well, no, I mean...
Give me that, come on.
The argument that you're making is the conventional argument. I'm not the kind of person who makes conventional arguments. I mean, to me, if I were to write a football book and one of the things I wanted to illustrate was well, you know what? Tom Brady's the best player of all time. No one needs to read that. I
have to say, you have given me a lot to think about in this book. It was a wonderful read, and I'm just going to cling to my Bradiness.
Well, you have the freedom to do that. I would not want to impose my ideas on you, but I appreciate you.
No, it was really interesting, though. All right, Chuck Klosterman, thanks so much for being here. Football is on sale now. To buy it, you can scan the QR code on your screen.